Fernand, good to see you. Okay, so you've had a couple days. I know this is all you've been doing. You've been going through each and every page 3 or 4 times over. What have you seen in the report as you've looked at it 2 or 3 times? I was just reading some of the other correspondents covering this very report, and they were saying, we've read it now 2, 3 times. We found something different.
Well, first off, Merry Christmas, Richard. Great to be here with you on Christmas Day with you and your viewers. But look, I see in the report very much what I saw in the hearings that we saw throughout the committee. From the very beginning, it was clear that the hearings were putting the full responsibility for the insurrection on January 6th on one man, President Donald Trump, as the instigator, the, if you will, mastermind that created the conditions that led to that violent insurrection on the Capitol on January 6th. And certainly in my reading of the report, that is the absolute takeaway with those criminal referrals to the Justice Department. I think if there's one thing that maybe did surprise me a little bit, although they are mentioned to some extent, folks like collaborators of President Trump, Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, even those 4 members of Congress that include Jim Jordan for possible ethics violations. You wonder and question, could they have amplified? Could they have been a little bit more explicit in perhaps naming some of those other collaborators, if you will, that were part and parcel of the effort, that were open in their discussions, especially when you saw revealed through Mark Meadows, the former president's chief of staff's text messages that suggested people like Ginny Thomas, the wife of the Supreme Court justice, what exactly was their role? Could there have been more had there been greater cooperation with the committee? So I look at it as a very clear problem for Donald Trump, whose legal exposure is going to grow even more problematic as we go into 2023.
As we go into 2023 here, Brendan, there is going to be no Liz Cheney, no Adam Kinzinger, and those were key characters, as you know, in this particular report. What did you take away from what this means for the future for them as well as the next Congress?
Yeah, I think there are some Trump allies and maybe even targets of this report. I saw Jeffrey Clark make some comments celebrating the end of the committee because it won't exist in the new Republican Congress. But I think that celebration is a little premature. While this committee is ending, this whole saga is now entering a pretty dangerous point for Donald Trump because this is where DOJ takes over. And obviously DOJ has been looking at this for a long time. But I think the next big thing you're gonna hear on this is action by the Justice Department, potentially indictments. So while the committee did its job, ultimately it's up to DOJ to finish it. Look, Congress is not a law enforcement body. It's a political body, and it did its job. One, to do, I think, significant political damage to Donald Trump. I think he is obviously a much weaker candidate than he was previously, and I think this committee had a lot to do with it. But they also put a lot of political pressure on the Department of Justice to take action. You hear a lot of people talk about how DOJ does its own thing and doesn't care. And I think it's naive to think that there aren't politics involved. There's some serious political pressure now on DOJ to take some action against the president.
Then we move to the transcripts, right? So, Fernand, we look at the transcripts. One of the things that just came out as we were reading through them is how Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell had then, according to Kyle Cheney reporting here, and I'm reading this out of Politico, asked then National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien to investigate rumors of a potential attack on Biden's inauguration. That is one of those details you don't necessarily want to read, but that's what's coming out of the transcripts right now. Fernand?
Indeed, Richard, a stunning revelation. And again, I think it speaks to what not only we saw and suspected, that Mitch McConnell was clearly much more concerned at the time, but I think, if anything, what that detail calls into question is why Mitch McConnell, when he had the opportunity to vote to convict Donald Trump and in essence maybe do some of the work that we're seeing come out of these committee reports, which would have barred him from seeking public office again, why he didn't take advantage of that opportunity when the moment was there in the immediate aftermath of January 6th. But I'd like to go back very quickly, Richard, to a point Brendan made that I think is critical going forward. Remember, the Republicans take control of the House of Representatives just after the new year. They are anxious to show a new type of approach to governing. There are even talk of their own investigations to try and muddy the water, so to speak. But if and when the Department of Justice indicts former President Trump, and I believe that that is now coming, that is going to escalate this and change, as Brendan said, a political dynamic and make it a legal one that is going to hang over all of the activities of the Republican Party in the House and call to question. Do they want to now fully and openly distance themselves from a former president with a historic indictment by the Department of Justice? That remains to be seen.
Something you know about quite well here, Brendan, that's congressional leadership. And as we saw the end of the year close here, Kevin McCarthy, related to the omnibus bill, we got a sense of his energy, at least at the end of the year. How do you see him, as we shift gears to 2023, being able to secure that leadership? Will he be able to?
Yeah, I think he will in the end, but this may be a rough road. So January 3rd is coming up. That is the first day of the new Congress, and the first thing they have to do is elect a speaker. And Kevin McCarthy has a handful of people who have vowed that they won't vote for him, enough to potentially block him. So I think you have to look at everything Kevin McCarthy has been doing over the last week, arguably over the last couple years, as an effort to shore up those votes. So he came out very strongly against the omnibus. I don't think that's particularly surprising. He needs to show that he's a fighter, and he has a number of people questioning whether he is. There's a real chance that the first vote fails, that he doesn't become speaker on the first ballot. That'll be the first time that has happened in 100 years. We haven't seen that really since any of us have been alive. But I do think in the end, he is the choice of the conference. He represents everything that the Republican Party stands for today in this Trump era. And I think ultimately he'll get there. It just may be a little ugly in the process.